Share screen. What is another? You can share the
Yes. Good evening, class, and welcome to our business systems and procedures. Now, I think up till now we are done with some 4 sessions. In the last sessions, we discussed about the process map, purpose of process mapping, flowcharts and maps, benefits, types, and business mapping symbols and business process mapping steps, right? So now, and then I think we have seen an example with respect to the registration process of a process map. So today we will be discussing about swim lane diagrams after process flow charts or process maps. So how did they arise? What are the purposes and benefits? And then we will be looking into some videos with respect to swim lane diagrams as well as using MS Excel for flow charting. After the video, again, we'll be looking into one of the illustrations of a swim lane diagram, okay, and the attributes and the elements of the same. Yes. So let us start with the history of swim lane diagram. Now, in the 1940s, uh, a slight variation of the process flow charts, which was called as a multi-column process charts, they started to be used. They were used on a wide scale in businesses. They were used to identify the processes that involved more than one unit or department. They were similar in purpose, similar to that of flowcharts, but they were different in their appearance and which were more or less common to that of today's swim lane diagram. So that time in 1940s, they were called as multi-column process charts. Multi-column in the same process charts that we were preparing initially, they were multi-columnar ones, more columns were involved. Now, in 1919, Gary Rumler and Alan Brach, they published a book that is improving processes, and that's where they highlighted the swim lane diagrams for the first time. Now the diagrams are also called as Rumler and Brach diagrams after these authors. So now let us look into the benefits or the purposes of this diagram. Why or at all they are being used in spite of having or we were aware of the flow charts that were being used. So in today's organizations with multiple work groups or departments that are involved in the decision making process, in there is exchange of information amongst the two, this diagramming technique, that is swim lane diagram, it helps in various ways. First of all, it can help to ensure that the right hand knows what the left hand is doing in the organization. So that's where, the department across the same hierarchy, they are aware of what's being going on. Then swim lane diagrams, they are used in other diagram types. They highlight which process steps or sub processes are assigned to a particular actor in the organization. Now, the particular actor, the word actor, we would mean over here that those who are acting actually on the activities or processes that are being carried out, or those who are responsible for carrying out these activities. Then step number two is, or the purpose number two is, by spelling out this in the diagram, right? One can highlight the redundancies between different lanes and identify the bottlenecks, the waste, and other inefficiencies. Now, this sometimes reveals the duplicative or unnecessary steps in the process, such as different departments performing the same task. So when we are preparing the swim line diagrams across the different departments that are being involved, it helps in identifying the duplicate tasks. It can also highlight process delays or capacity constraints within a particular swim lane so that they can be addressed and resolved. Now, this can increase the performance and quality and reduce unnecessary work and costs thereby. Again, one can use a second swim lane diagram to model a better way to structure the process or to account for the changing circumstances such as staffing changes or technology changes, right? Because we are aware that all the processes are subject to continuous change. So that's where we can have another swim lane diagram for the same. Looking into or taking the basics from the first one, then like other diagrams, the swim lane diagrams, they are able to communicate in clearer terms in comparison to a narrative description would explain. And swim lane diagrams, they can be formalized as a way to integrate the processes between the teams or the departments, resulting in a cleaner processes on an ongoing basis, right? So with this introduction of swim lane diagram, now let us look into a small video with respect to the swim lane diagram.
Today, we're talking about swim lane diagrams, exploring what they are, how they are used, why they are beneficial, and how to start making your own. A swim lane diagram, also sometimes called a cross-functional flowchart, diagrams a process from start to finish, but it also divides these steps into categories to help distinguish which departments or employees are responsible for each set of actions. These lanes are columns or rows that keep actions visually separate.
Yes, are you able to hear to this video? Is it clearly audible?
Yes, ma'am, it is audible.
Okay, fine.
Separated from others. A swim
Video
lane
is not there, right?
makes responsibilities
Yes.
more clear than a regular.
Yes.
It's not video, only audio, right?
No, it's video as well.
No, cannot see the video, only audio is,
Okay.
it's only audible.
Just a moment. Okay.
Oh, sure.
Yes, are you able to view it now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Now we can see your video.
Okay, okay, fine.
Today, we're talking about swim lane diagrams, exploring what they are, how they are used, why they are beneficial, and how to start making your own. A swim lane diagram, also sometimes called a cross-functional flowchart, diagrams a process from start to finish, but it also divides these steps into categories to help distinguish which departments or employees are responsible for each set of actions. These lanes are columns or rows that keep actions visually separated from others. A swim lane diagram makes responsibilities more clear than a regular flowchart. When looking to improve processes, knowing which department is responsible for what can help speed up the process of correcting inefficiencies and eliminating delays. Swim lane diagrams are useful in many ways. Often they can help you streamline complex processes. During any process improvement initiative, swim lanes help identify not just the bottlenecks in a process, but also who is responsible for them. A swim lane diagram is also useful in clarifying responsibilities and helping teams work together in a world where they often don't fully understand what the other teams do. This may help you find costly redundancies and duplications or gaps in communication problems. Swim lanes can also help you understand deeper layers of complexity in a process. Symbols can represent external factors such as peripheral processes, external data, and third-party entities, in addition to the familiar flowchart symbols and notation. Now let's go over how to build a swim lane flowchart. It's really easy to do using an automated drawing tool like SmartDraw. First, identify the lanes. Decide what divisions you need represented by swim lanes and label them. The lanes can run horizontally or vertically depending on the structure of your flowchart and what you think reads better. Now add your symbols. Define the starting point of the process. Add a rounded rectangle to the top of the appropriate swim lane to indicate its starting point and label it. Continue adding steps to your chart. Each step should be connected to the one before it with a line. In this example, to add steps in the same swim lane, add from top to bottom. To add a step in another division, go from left to right. With each step, describe what it represents until you reach the end of the process. The arrows between the steps indicate the transfer or flow of information. Continue to analyze your processes over time and update your flowchart as employees and teams change and responsibilities and tasks evolve. Those are the basics of swim lane diagrams. We hope this helps you with your own process documentation and improvements. Thanks for watching.
Yes, so after looking into the video about swim lane diagrams and how can we draw the diagrams, uh, right now let us come to some attributes and elements of swim lane diagrams. Now, using some standard symbols of whatever type of process flow chart is being produced, the swim lanes, they introduce parallel or vertical horizontal lines grouping the process steps by the actor, that is the person acting on the activity, such as an employee, work group department, or even an information system. Now, each lane is labeled by that actor. Sometimes, but not always, horizontal lanes are more practical given that the desktop computer screens are wider than tall. So process steps are spelled out within their respective lanes and they also shown are the interconnection of steps between the lanes. So this shows how the different actors, that is the performers, they interact to keep a process rolling efficiently. Now let us look into another diagram of, yes, swim lane. So that's what we were speaking about, the illustration of swim lane diagram. Now we can see over here that there are different departments. Let me, yes, enlarge the diagram a bit so that you can view it better. Now here are the different departments, that is wherein the sales department, management, and the finance department of the organization. And then we are having the clients on one side. Now these are working as actors, that is persons who are acting on the entire activity of sales or management or the financing department and so on. Now, say we start over here where a sales call is made by the sales department. Now, listening to the call, the client or the customer, he will be placing an order. Now, the output of placing the order is filling up the order form for placing the order on a credit. So that is what is referred to as the credit form. On receipt of the credit form, on receipt of this credit form that is filled up by the client or the customer, right, the order gets recorded by the sales department. Now, the recorded order, it generates the order form with respect to the client placing the order within the organization, right? Now, the finance department, once the order form is filled up, then we directly come over here where the finance department, it looks into the credibility of the customer or the client. Now, if the previous history indicates a bad credit, yes, then what happens? The sales department gives a sale call. The call is made for the recovery of the credit which is not yet paid by the customer. On the other hand, if the credit check we looked into, if it is a bad credit, that's what a call is given for the recovery. Now, if the previous history indicates a high balance is recoverable, okay, sorry, in case it is a bad credit, then the sales call will be given as if, and the order that is placed by the client, that will be denied by the organization because the credibility is not good of the customer. Now, in case the credibility is found to be okay, right? But again, there is a high balance that is recoverable, then again, a call would be made for the recovery purpose. Again, a sales call would be made in order to recover the previous amount that is still liable. Now, if the accounts receivable position is found to be okay, then a report is generated and viewed by the management. A report, credit report with respect to the customer is generated. This is viewed by the management. Yes, it is viewed by the management, and on receiving the approval from the management, then the credit terms are finalized. Okay, and then the terms are approved, and then the order will be sanctioned, or the material or the equipment for whatever purpose the order is being placed, that will be sanctioned. So again, this criteria of how do we check the credit with respect to the orders placed by the clients, this criteria of looking into the credit checking of the clients is done by the management. So this is how we look into the diagram. Yes, swim lane diagram with respect to the different departments involved, that is sales department, overall management, and finance department, and the external client that is involved in the processing of this entire order receipt process. Okay. So now with this, yes, we go back to our presentation where we discussed the swim lane diagram's attributes and element. We discussed one of the illustration, and now let us go into the detailed process mapping of a swim lane diagram. Okay, so
in this video, we're going to continue our analysis of detailed process mapping techniques. And in particular, we'll look at swim lane diagrams. The learning objectives are going to be to show some of the benefits of using a swim lane diagram for process improvement, including
okay, are you able to view or only listen to it? Yes, are you able to view this video?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'll make it full screen and start again.
mapping techniques. And in particular, we'll look at swim lane diagrams. The learning objectives are going to be to show some of the benefits of using a swim lane diagram for process improvement, including how the swim lane diagram can be used to help you analyze white space, how a swim lane diagram can be used to help you with.
Now by white space, we mean the redundancies, the inefficiencies that we had discussed in the purposes of the swim lane diagram. Where one of the purposes is identifying the redundancies. Yes.
Collaborative drill down techniques. We'll look at the way swim lane diagrams can help you with stakeholder analysis and analyzing parallel flows. We'll provide you some examples of different swim lane diagrams, and we'll review some best and worst practices for building any type of detailed process map, not just a swim lane diagram. All right, I'm pulling pictures and information from the business process improvement workbook. And what I want to do before we dive into the details of a swim lane diagram is I want to compare it to a different type of process map that we've talked about. The map above this red line is a high-level process map. High-level process maps we use at the beginning of the define phase, primarily as a communication tool. This happens to be a high-level process map of everything from the customer being hungry to the customer eating. Looks like it would be, if I were going to call it, it's a process map of the pizza fulfillment process. Fits the criteria for high-level map. It's about 1, 2, 3, 4 decision box. We'll just call it 5, 6, 7 different steps or activities. Fits on a single page. Describes from beginning to end the customer's viewpoint of the system. Looks like a good high-level process map. I'd use that all the time in working with stakeholders and communicating what this project is about. The map below is a sometimes called deployment flow diagram or a swim lane diagram. It's in many ways a template that can be used for detailed process mapping. Let me clean up the screen a little and we'll zoom in. One of the things that I like about these swim lane diagrams is that they're relatively easy to read and interpret. Well, this is a high-level process map above. You can see that I can just superimpose specific steps into the swim lane diagram. And it's pretty easy to interpret and understand the flow through the system. What swim lane diagrams do, though, is they also include another important element for process analysis, and that is the stakeholder interaction within the process itself. And you can see here we've got the customer, we've got the cashier, the cook, and the delivery driver. They each have their own lane because they all interact in the process flow itself. One of the reasons why I like this is because it then makes it easy for me when I'm working with those particular stakeholders, say in voice of customer interviews. I can meet up with the customer group and say, we want to take a look at these particular steps. They're steps that you interact with the process in. We'll be asking you a series of questions. If you've got any other feedback about the other activities, great, but we'll focus in on the ones that are inside your lane. But there's more. I like swim lane diagrams with with these separate lanes for stakeholders because it's also a great stakeholder analysis gap tool. Each of these important stakeholders should have been identified in our stakeholder analysis. And as we identified stakeholders and then prioritize the ones to do interviews for, they probably should have made it to our voice of customer interviews as well. I mean, they actually interact within the process, helping to create the final fulfilled product or fulfilled service request. If they aren't as candidates in our voice of customer interviews, I'll be asking my team members, why not? So it's a great gap analysis tool. But there's more. One of the common occurrences that I see when we send teams out to do stakeholder interviews, voice of customer interviews, is that frequently the activity associated with that stakeholder in the high-level map is described as one box, one big thing. But when we go in and we actually ask those stakeholders to describe the work that they perform, it's a whole bunch of activities. And I'm going to zoom in so that we can see this example play out a little bit more. Originally, when the high-level process map was created, for the cook's activity, we had it as one box called make the pizza. But when we went in and actually interviewed the cook, here's what the cook told us. The making of the pizza actually involves a whole bunch of other things. There's the cooking of the pizza. There is the quality check that I perform. There's actually the packaging step that I perform as well. Swim lane diagrams allow us to have an area in the map where we can take this new knowledge and put it easily into the map without modifying upstream or downstream steps that we've included in the map. It's in essence an area where I can put all of this new information I found out about the cook. Why this is helpful is that in an iterative drill down approach towards process mapping, each team member will be responsible for filling out the portions of the map that they were assigned VOC interviews to work on. So when a different team member goes to interview the delivery driver and they find out that they do more than just deliver the pizza, there's a whole bunch of other things that happen. They have a container, a lane that they can put all of those additional steps and activities in. And it doesn't actually mess up the space that is being used for folks that were entering information about the cook or the cashier or the customer. Makes it easy for iterative updates to the map. When we interview a stakeholder group like the cook, frequently they'll provide us with great detail about the activities that happen inside their lane. And that makes sense. That's the type of work that they do. Activities that happen upstream or downstream, they're going to have less familiarity with and probably provide us with less detail. And when they do describe all of the activities they perform in the lane, there will be unique activities as well as handoffs. And I'm going to highlight these handoffs in yellow right now, right here, handoffs and handoffs here. Those handoffs are important to understand and know, but I always want to make sure that my team members that are doing the interview, they also ask questions about the handoffs that I'm going to highlight in a different color. I always want my team members to ask questions about these upstream and downstream handoffs as well, because the handoffs in red are almost always more impactful to poor performance than the handoffs that I've highlighted in yellow. The handoffs in red, the arrows that cross swim lanes, that's a visual representation of white space in the system. Idle time handoffs between the different functional groups. And here's what we know about white space. White space is one of our 4 big process inefficiency characteristics. It's one of the 4 biggies that we're always taking a look at: white space, rework loops, process variation.
Yes, so white spaces, he is trying to identify all the inefficiencies that lie in between this interdepartmental sharing that takes place, right? Rather than the departmental ones within the same lane. So it is interlane inefficiencies that are identified in red. He says that they are more important to be handled than those in the yellow.
And visual waste. In knowing where the white space is, and then being able to step back and ask questions about, do we need to quantify how big or impactful this white space is? And when we are quantifying variables that are impacting overall performance, we know that those are called CTQs. Swim.
Okay, so CTQ means critical to quality. So what is impacting the quality of the entire processes or activities in your business organization? So that is critical to quality. Identify those.
Line diagrams help me to see possible CTQs, and then they can help me in prioritizing which of the CTQs should we go out and actually measure in the measure phase. So in this next example, this is a process map of capital equipment procurement process. One of the things that I love about swim lane diagrams is that it makes it easy for team members to incorporate a timeline. And at first, this timeline and the time metrics associated with the process, they could be estimates where when we're interviewing this particular stakeholder, the business unit, we ask them, when you perform your activities up here, about how long does it take? They might say, yeah, about 3 weeks. And we can put that down as our estimate. We could go back later in the measure phase, and if important enough, actually measure this phenomena, treat it as a CTQ, and refine that and find out that, you know, it's actually 19.5 days. But the notion that you're able to include time metrics at the bottom of a swim lane diagram, that gives a lot of insight for team members and process analysts. Be careful though when you decide to use a timeline like this. Here's the trap that can sometimes occur. Timelines are typically drawn to the scale of the steps drawn out, not necessarily drawn out to the actual time elements. So you can see that about 1/3 of the page is spent in these first 21 days of activity, which, okay, it might then lead team members to go, if we have to focus our limited time and resources on just a few areas for improvement, this 21 days is much bigger than the 6 days or the 15 days of activity that's happening in here, or the 5 days that's happening here. But because the timelines are typically drawn to the scale of the actual steps as drawn out, team members can sometimes slip into the trap of not seeing very impactful steps that are just a single box. And so in this example, while 21 days accounts for these 3 steps, 71 days accounts for this very small receive and use step. And I get it. The only way that we could prevent this from happening is to, in essence, stretch out the receive and use box so that it takes up much more space, so that the timeline is drawn to scale, and we rarely ever do that. But you could, if you wanted to, or.
So what he's trying to say over here is that instead of having these 3 activities in detail with respect to 21 days of duration, what could have been done or what has gone wrong in with respect to this diagram, swim lane diagram, is greater activity details should have been given with respect to those activities that are carried out for a duration of 71 days, or even this 55 days, that is the next activity, that is with respect to issue of payment and supplier being paid. So in the swim lane diagram, greater details over here 71 days of activity, and that is represented just by one box. Okay, so instead we could have had greater details over here. So we shouldn't be making such mistakes while preparing the swim lane diagrams, right? Yes.
You just need to let your team members know that the timelines are not often drawn to scale. There's another concern, though, that I have with this 71-day occurrence. Anytime I see one box, one activity box that represents a significant part of overall processing time, overall lead time in the system, that's a red flag to me that the team probably hasn't gone out and interviewed folks about this or walked this part of the process. This one box is drawn only as one box because we don't have enough knowledge to know that the 71 days isn't one box, it's really 12 or 13 different steps that are going on. This is a red flag to me that we need to go out and observe and understand better what's going on there. In part
Yes. So red flag over here would mean that we look into more into the details of this activity, that is a single box being given, because there are chances that there might be more number of inefficiencies within this 71 days of activity, which includes not just one, but which is one box represents the entire set of say 13 or 15 activities that could be included. So one has to go and one has to inquire into the respective activities to see to it whether that there are not CTQ, that is critical to quality. Yes.
2 of swim lane diagrams. We'll take a look at some additional examples. We'll
Okay. So that's with respect to the preparation of swim lane diagrams and what are the precautions that we should be taking while preparing them. So now with this, we now move back to our presentation. So we have done everything with respect to swim lane diagrams, wherein we looked into the example of delivering the pizza right from the order being placed by the customer to the actual the pizza is being eaten by the customer. And then we looked into some procurement of capital equipment, so wherein instead of going detail into the steps of procurement, we looked into what is the necessary care we should be taking in preparing the swim lane diagrams. That is, we shouldn't be having uh, singular or less number of boxes and details with respect to the activities that are consuming more duration in the entire process. So that's about swim lane diagrams. And then now we move ahead with how do we use MS Excel for preparing these flowcharts. So let us look into this another video.
Yeah, hello everyone and welcome to this tutorial. In this tutorial, I want to show you how to draw process charts in Microsoft Excel. So in the internet and on this site, netmind.net, components effective process map, I saw this and I want to replicate it in Microsoft Excel. So for those of us who work Microsoft Excel and want to present visuals of this nature or process charts of this nature, we can also just use Excel to do something like this and then use it for our presentation. Let me show you how to do that. So here we have the Excel, and the first thing I want to do is I want to go to my view tab and take out the grid line. So I have just this. So the next thing I want to do is to look out for things that I would use here and bring them in. In other words, I want to look out for the objects I will use here. So here I know I have that of the stat. I know you have rectangle, I have circles, I have a decision box, and all of that. So that's exactly what I will be doing here. And to do that, I will go to my Insert tab, I'll go to Illustrations, and then Shapes. So here is where I would have the shapes I would work with. Okay, so these are recently used shapes, and you can see that much of what we'll be using are here in recently used shapes. So let me pick the rectangle, and the first thing I want to do is what will be in the header. What will be in the header. So here I have technology acquisition process. So that's what I will do. Technology acquisition process. So having done that, I can always select it. In my home tab, I can change the color to whatever. I can also, in my format tab, I can also take out the shape outline. So I always like taking it out because, like you can see, it looks smooth and fine here. You can also select it and then either increase your text here. Let's put it at the middle, so that's it for us. So we can use it in this way. So the next thing I would like to do is to come out with the swim lanes. So I'm going to replicate this, replicate it here. Okay, I can use my arrow buttons to just adjust where it should be, and I think it's fine. We do not need this text, no. So I'm taking it out. And what I'm going to do is extend it this way. Okay. And this time around, I need an outline. So I'm going in here, pick an outline, take a line and give it a color. And once I do that, I take out the fill colors. So I have something like this. So I'm going to replicate this one and just place it side by side with this. Okay, like this, and then we do a third one. That third one is just going to stay below here.
Yes, so the horizontal divisions over here are being done in order to indicate the different departments that are involved and the interconnectivity amongst the departments.
So arrow buttons can help you position it the way you want. So it looks like we're fine here. So 1, 2, and 3. The first one here is empty, so I'm not going to do it. So we have executive team, business unit, and project teams. Okay. So to do that, what I will be doing is I still can use a rectangle. In fact, it's all has to do with how creative you could be with these tools. So what I'm going to do is just I'm just going to create something like this. While it is, you can see this here, I'm just going to turn it. So there it goes in, and just size it appropriately. Okay, so that is what it is. And, having it this way, I just replicate using Ctrl D, select it, and then Ctrl D like this puts it like that. So we'll find this. Okay. So the next thing we do is we go and look for a text box. So I have a text box here. I'm going to bring in that text box, putting executive team. Okay. So once again, we find out that we have this here. So it allows us to turn it in whichever way we want to stand up this way. Okay. So I'm going to move it here. The Q15. Let's make it a little bigger. Make it white. Font color white. And we can make it bold if we want to. So that's that. So again, Control D, I want to replicate it and we have it here. And also there we have that. So here we have the project team. So just project team, and here we have the business unit. Business. So you can see that it's coming into shape like this. So what I will just do is let me just minimize it so that we can see it this way. So you can always bring it back by double clicking and it comes up this way. Okay, so so we have it this way. So we now see what things we need to bring in. So I need so I go to my insert, and insert we go to shapes, and then we'll be bringing in stats. Okay, so here we should have it. Okay, that's it. So just going to use it here. So it's the start. So we have a start here. To just enter this screen. Okay, so that's our start. I want to replicate it because I know that I have somewhere where it's going to be an end. And it's the same thing. So I just go here and then to that and then go back. And we have rectangles. 1, 2, 3. So I'm going back to my insert. So rectangles. Now we can pick those rectangles from anywhere, but let's do this. There is one in each of the lanes from what we see there. So I'm going to just replicate this. I think there is one here, and there's one somewhere. So we'll position them where they should be. Okay. Actually, I have two here. And the next thing we need a decision box. So I have a decision box here. Okay, so we have this one here. And we will duplicate it because there is another one here. This time is smaller. Okay, so just there. So we have those two decision boxes. And then we have this other one here. It's the off-page connector. So I'm going to just pick it. So somewhere here, I'm going to take out its outline. Save here. Okay. So there they are. So the next thing we will be doing is we will have this still go back to our shapes and bring in circles. What will the circles do? They will help us for the numbers. So let's take out the outline, and so it has a value of 1. Now you can see where the 1 is. It's not ideal, so you just come here and then use this for it, so to get it to the Okay, so we need to just position them where they should be. We have one here, and one. So replicating it is easy. While it is selected, just do your Control D, and then you'll be able to have it copied. So here, I'm just going to change this to 2. And the next one is duplicate this, here, change it to 3, and here we have 4 and 5. So duplicate, move it to your desired position. This is 4. Here, let's move it down. So that's about what we have here. That's about what we have here. And then the next thing we'll do is bring in the arrows, okay? So that's one interesting thing when you're working with shapes in Excel. So arrows are here. And so we have the straight one. So once you select an arrow and bring it close to a shape, you're going to do these circles around it. So there are points that you can use uh, to stick your arrows. You see, so I'm going to choose this one, hold down my mouse button, and I'm going to draw it, and I'm coming to this shape. I'm seeing another one, and I just aim at the center of it and then leave it. So what does that do? You see here. So you see, as I move this, they are joined together. Straight, and then we have this one here. Okay. Okay, so that's how you're going to do for all of the others, except that the kind of arrows you choose might be different. So for this one, I'm going to pick this, and I think we have this. Yeah. Okay, let me confirm that. Okay, that's exactly what we have. So still using this, we use it to build to this one, and then we have that there. That's this other one. We have one coming to the end here. So we're going to pick it again, and it's going to come from this end to this end. Now, because we have it like this and it's joined, I can always adjust, and you can see it follows with it. And also with the arrows, I can do some adjustments. And then we have this one. So doesn't it look nice? Yes, it does. You can do all of this in Excel, and then we have this other one coming from here. Okay. So I need to go to my shapes. So this, so this one is so there we have it. You can see that it's coming to what it is here. Get another one. So you can see how it is done. It's quite easy. Just get whatever objects you feel is appropriate and then implement them as it is done. Okay, so we're going to have another one here. And just 2 more. This goes straight down to this. So you see the green buttons that come up to tell us that yes, okay, we've made a connection between 2 objects. That's it. So get it to so for this other one, all what we need to do is use same this time an arrow. So most of the time you're going to find yourself using the elbow arrow or the elbow connector. So we just pick that into this thing. So you'll notice that the editor just pick this knob here, pick this point here, and try to make them fit in. So you can see that it does just what we want. So you can see that we've done all of these things, bring them in here, and that's what we have. The next thing you need to do is bring in all whatever you want to write within it. Now I'll show you something like this one that says that approves project. Okay, so approves project. So if you see, you find out that it doesn't fit in the way we want. So how do we, what do we do to make it fit in? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to right click on it and selection. So once you do that, you see this size and property icon here. So I'm going to click on that icon. Clicking on that icon, we are going to come to text box. If it's not open, if it's like this, just click on text box and you see it. So what I need to do is come to the margins, These are the what controls the margins. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce all of them to 0. So that gives me some space within here. So once I've done that, I can see. So we now have that. So we can increase it. We can bring it to the middle like this. We can increase it to as much as we can take. So that is what we have here. So most of the times you're going to find out that it may not fit in what you want to write. Just make sure that all the margins are 0, and then you adjust the size, and then certainly you're going to get it something you want inside it. So I'm going to just take some time to put in the things that are inside and come back to you. All right, so we're back again, and this is what we have. We've been able to bring in each of these things inside the box in it. So I just wanted you to see how we could bring in these things that we have here. You see approve, reject, requirement, need more work, and all of those things. So let's look at how we bring in this approve into it. So what we do is that we go to our insert, we go to look for a text box, and here it is. So we put it there, and what we want to bring in is approved. So we have this approved in. So what we just need to do is bring it in here. I think that's where it is. Okay, so it's in there. And while it's in there, all you need to do is you give it a white field. So it has a white field there. So size it. So that is it. So you can see it there. It's just as if it is what it is here. So you could use any color for it to get it. Just use green for approve. So you have it tested. So you can replicate this one because you have another place, for example, rejected. So I'm going to just copy this one, bring it somewhere, and what we do is just use rejected. And rejected, yes, we can use red for that. So let's use red. So you can see how it fits in fine with it. So you could use it to do all the others, you know, like these are the ones. Just Control D, move it here, and see that this one is approved project. Project approved, whatever it is there. So it's just extend, shows. So that's the way you can bring it in and have something really, really fine and presentable. And you can use it to do a lot of your presentation and have them in such a way that makes it interesting for you to use in presenting things that are related to processes. So put this one here. This, this looks like this. Okay. It's requirement you know, okay. Let's have, let's see. This time I just want to put rework. So I have this. Just there. So you can see how this came out, and you already know how you could use colors for all of this. Those are things that we already know how to do. But use colors in such a way that it brings out the information just the way you can present it. So it makes it nice. Huh? Okay, so because you're using a background like this, you might have to change one or two things. So this is how you can come up with a process chart in Microsoft Excel. It's quite presentable. If you want to select everything, you take it to PowerPoint or do any of such thing, just come to this find and select, and it's in the home tab, find and select, just come down and select objects. So that makes it possible for you to select all of them as one. So you see, everything is selected here. And so you could do anything. You can copy it that way, or you can go to your format and then group them, group all of them to become one. That's it. So you can move. So when you select it, you can move just anywhere as one object. So I hope you learned something from this tutorial on how to view the process charts with Microsoft Excel. So
Yes, so that's probably where we stop over here for today. So we are done with the flow diagrams. We were done with that in the previous session itself. Today we discussed about swim lane diagrams and how to prepare the swim lane diagrams in Excel. So now tomorrow probably I will be, as I promised you all, I would be coming up with the entire flow chart of manufacturing activity. Yes, and then within we move on to the next activities in the units to come. So now in the previous session, I had discussed with you all with respect to the handling of a state level SIP competition. Now that evaluation idea is still on hold. Tomorrow we'll be going into the discussions with the faculty members of the college, and then we will think whether we can have it for the evaluation purpose as such. Right? Yes. So that's where we stop over here for today. Uh, yes. Thank you, class.
Thank you, ma'am.